So let's see. So we're going to talk about funding ventures, what is important to investors, and what do entrepreneurs need to understand. But first, let's all introduce ourselves. So why don't we go ahead and start here with Francois. Just introduce yourself a little bit and just a quick introduction, and then we'll go into journey, and then we'll just go down the road.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm François Robinet. I'm the managing partner of AXA Venture Partners. So the title on the program was wrong. It's not AXA Strategic Venture, and I'm not managing director. It's AXA Venture Partner. I'm a managing partner. But having said that, I've been an investor almost all my life in different asset classes. Private equity, public equity, then a big investment portfolio, and worked with the big insurance group AXA in the asset management side, and then realized a few years ago, 7 years ago, that there was no exposure to technology in general and to venture and growth in particular, and this is how the idea of AXA Venture Partner came. So it was also a little bit an entrepreneurial story because we started a platform from scratch. Having said that, with a big check from this big investor, which always helps when you want to start an investment business. And 7 years later, we have 1.3 billion of assets under management. We invest in venture, so early stage of companies, Series A typically, until growth and very soon late growth, so Series D and above. Mm-hmm. We have also a fund of fund business where I invest in other funds, in other VC funds, and we do that 50% in the US and 50% in Europe. So that's what we do.
Terrific. Now over to Israel, Liran.
Hi, my name is 𝐿'Iran Ezralant. I'm a managing partner at Miran Capital. It's a fund that my partner and I established together in Israel. We're a $55 million fund, and we invest seed and pre-seed in what you call Israeli-related ventures. So either companies domiciled in Israel or companies that have Israeli founders, and we focus on deep tech, software deep tech, and so cybersecurity, fintech, developer tools, test tools, just general enterprise software. We're currently on our second fund, and our fund had out of 22 investments, 5 exits and 2 unicorns to date.
All right, terrific. Now over to Rob.
Cool. So I'm Rob Gneiser. I'm one of the managing partners of the Environmental Technologies Fund. We are, I think, one of Europe's oldest and largest sustainable investment funds. And we're now in our 4th fund, investing out of that. We actually have an investment in Greece. So I'm very pleased to be here, not just to support the company, but be with you all today. Before that, I used to invest money for the government of Singapore. So I used to work for Temasek, for those that know them. And prior to that, I was in Silicon Valley as a tech investor there. So I've always loved tech, and that's what I've done since I was at the other school up the river from MIT when I graduated from business school.
Rob, we don't speak of that.
That's right. I didn't say the name.
I heard about those guys.
I didn't say the name. It's like Voldemort around here. But anyway.
Terrific. And Alex?
Yeah, I'm Alex Eleftheriadis. I'm a partner at Big Pie Ventures, which is a deep tech, early stage, seed to Series A fund operating here in Greece. We invest in companies that have presence in Greece, are not necessarily Greek companies, but they have a connection to Greece and a development team here. We're at our second fund. The first one was 47 million euros. The second one just started with support from a Hellenic Development Bank for Innovation, which are our anchor investor. And we keep the same theme, deep tech, early stage, seed to Series A. Before that, I had created my own company. I lived for many, many years in New York. I was a professor at Columbia University for many, many years. And then I left Columbia, started a company doing video conferencing products called Video. And then after the company was sold, I moved over to the investment side of things.
Terrific. Okay. So first question, we're going to talk about how do you identify the opportunities that really made a big impact on your career? So 𝐿'Iran, you had a great story about how you started your fund. Why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Yeah, we had, I guess the establishment of Miran Capital is definitely interesting. My partner and I were working at Bloomberg Capital. It's a Silicon Valley-based fund that has a presence in Israel. I'm sure you've known them. And after about 2 years of being a principal, mainly a junior part of the investment team at Bloomberg, I received an unexpected call from an investor that wanted to start a new fund in Israel. So the offer was more like, you bring the strategy, I bring the fund, let's start a venture fund together. And I guess that story would have been more common if that investor wasn't an Emirati, high net worth Emirati in wanting to invest in Israel, and that predated the Abraham Accords by almost 4 years. So we were probably one of the first bodies to invest directly Emirati money into Israel. It was an interesting story. By the way, I think the Israeli public was very much prepared for it. There was actually a very positive perception of the Emirates in Israel, but it was still hard. Even setting up a bank account wasn't an easy feat at that point. Our first fund was a single LP fund with just that one investor. And then 4 years into this work, two things happened. So the first was the Abraham Accords, and the second is that we had our first and second exit. So that was just a lot of tailwinds for us to go ahead and start our, to go ahead and raise a larger and multi-LP fund. And it wasn't easy, but I think comparing this to any other, like trying to start a first-time fund or a first-time multi-LP fund, I feel like we had an easier path because we already had the track record and we already had a working system just with a single LP. And we're currently investing from, we call it Milan 2, but it's actually the first fund we've established. So I think even just joining that ride of, hey, let's help citizen of a country we currently don't have any diplomatic relationship with to start a new fund, a new investment vehicle was a very scary decision, but it definitely paid out.
So you're almost like a VC entrepreneur. Yeah.
Cool. We actually say that when people ask us what's our edge, what's our, and I think there's a lot, and I think that background is really helpful when you're an entrepreneur turned VC because you understand the other side. I guess where we are different is we're not founders that became VCs, we're VCs that are founders at the moment. And yes, a lot of our day-to-day is our own positioning, our own scaling, and so it's even nicer and more interesting when we advise companies on doing that when we're struggling with those challenges ourselves at the same time.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Now I want to turn to Francois, and maybe the similar question on just big opportunity that made a big difference in your career.
Well, I would say the general theme in these big opportunities is about risk.
Yes.
And I'm going to mention quickly two examples, but each time, if I had tried to rationalize the decision, I wouldn't have done what I did. And it's a little bit about gut feeling, about what you feel like doing in your life and so on. First one was a very long time ago. I was super young, starting my career in AXA, doing M&A and beginning a traditional corporate career. And then I had a call. There was an acquisition in California, a small asset management boutique, and they said we need somebody to go there. So there was no job description, no timeline and so on.
Those are the best jobs, though,
yeah,
right?
I just had my first daughter 6 months before, and I told my wife, "There's this opportunity." She said, "Well, that's interesting. Let's think about it." And I told her, "Yeah, we need to think, but I need to give my answer this afternoon." Actually.
Yeah.
And we said yes, and we went there, and we spent 5 wonderful years in the US, and it shifted completely my career to investment, actually. Perfect. So that's the first thing. And the second one, when I started AXA Venture Partners, so I had this vision that, investing in technology makes sense in general, but in AXA in particular. So I pitched the idea, and I knew people. So it took some time, but it worked in the end. They said, yes, that's a good idea, this technology thing. We'll give you some money. So it's always good, as I said, when you start an asset management business to have a big check. So yes, there is the entrepreneurial dimension, but entrepreneurial without the first initial check is difficult. But still, they said, okay, we give you this money, but you're on your own. Right. We need to have full alignment of interests, so you're on your own. You're start the first. And so from one day to the next, I was again in this, managing a big portfolio with everything around it, big teams and big infrastructure. And suddenly I was on my own. Actually with my assistant, because when I left, she said, I come with you. And she said, what am I going to do now? I said, you're going to be head of finance, head of HR. Nobody could hear what I was saying?
I heard it. It was excellent.
I hope it's going to be. I hope you can hear me now. Actually, so we started from scratch, and I went to the US to recruit a team, in Europe to recruit a team. Again, if I had rationalized the decision, I wouldn't have done it, right? Because it didn't make sense. Right. And now, 7 years later, I mean, that was the best decision of my life.
So I want to jump in because I feel like we're living parallel lives. France, Israel, the States, the UK. And you mentioned the risk. I'm going to say the word passion. I think we all have a tremendous passion for what we do, and we're all looking to challenge ourselves on an ongoing basis. So my first gig was in Asia. I went to a Morgan Stanley office that had 10 people in it in 1990 in Hong Kong, and everybody said, why are you going, right? It's all happening in New York or maybe London, right? Why are you going? But that, for me, was exciting and interesting and dramatic. When I went to Silicon Valley after business school, I knew nothing about tech. And I think my children would still say I know nothing about tech, even though I'm a tech investor today. And it was just so exciting, the thing to do. And I was so passionate about getting involved and helping those entrepreneurs. And then more recently in my career, I set up a sustainability fund. So to walk away from a great job at one of the leading firms in the world that frankly has tremendous resources that they can bring to bear, to do something entrepreneurial, to go do your own thing, to try to give something back through sustainable investing, that was a calling. And we wanted to see if we could be entrepreneurs, and we could see if we could do it just what our entrepreneurs do. So it's very important to follow your passion and keep challenging yourself with new ideas.
Terrific. Now bring it to Greece.
I'll echo that. In fact, all my professional experience has been in the States. In fact, I've been active in Greece for the past 4 years with Big Pie. But look, I started off as a PhD student, then a professor for many years. So I left, I was a tenured professor at Columbia, so I left that. Why? It's what you said about the passion. I didn't feel this was the right thing for me to do. I was always interested in startups. I tried once in '99, didn't work out. Went back to Columbia, and then in 2005, I went out and eventually quit Columbia. And I had a wonderful sort of journey for 12, 13 years as a founder. But then when that was sort of completed, then I moved to investment. It was a way to continue. And I think what you said about the instinct, I think if you look at your career as a track that you essentially lead, right, you prepare yourself. And then when everything is aligned and the opportunity comes, it feels natural, so you believe it's instinctive, but in actual fact, all the other things that you have prepared yourself about click and you feel it's the right thing to do. So I think it's a process of preparation that's driven by passion, and when the right opportunity comes, you jump. For me, for example, video happened because Ofer Shapiro, an Israeli, came to my office and we had a discussion, and that's how the company started. I didn't know the guy, okay? He found me. So if I was not paying attention, let's say, to what he was saying, or I was busy that day, things will be different. But I was prepared. Why? Because of the previous sort of path to basically listen and be receptive.
Terrific.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so one thing that came out in our discussion earlier that I thought was really interesting, and it was teased up a little bit at the beginning, is it about the idea or is it about the people? And when you're making investment decisions, what's more important, wants to jump in and take that?
As
Go ahead.
As a seed and pre-seed investor, I'm not sure that would follow in all stages, but 100% the people. I've written checks to founders before they've actually decided what is their idea. So, and I'll refine that a little bit. I care about knowing that they think about it the right way and that I feel like they would eventually hit the right idea, but I don't actually need them to have the right idea off the bat. And I've invested, one of my best investments to date, a company that raised over $100 million so far, started Mesh Payments. They started out with a completely different idea, but I didn't care about the idea. I cared about them being passionate about the payment market, and the market was large and it was interesting enough. And Oded, the CEO, being an expert in the payment space. So I think specific idea almost doesn't matter at all. Market matters a lot, and team matters the most, if you ask me.
Idea doesn't matter as much. Market matters a lot. Team matters.
Right. So it's really hard to pivot completely out of the market you're initially targeting, and the market also has some reflections on whether or not the specific team is competitive into that market. But the specific idea is only the entry point. This is only their initial thought of how to tackle that market, and that would almost always change.
Rob, you're looking thoughtful.
I was just thinking about what you were saying. I mean, I had a very simple explanation when people used to ask me this question, which is people make great companies, technologies don't. And a good team, a good group of people can even work with a plus-minus technology and still make it a great company. So that's the first thought. Then I thought more about it. And I thought, well, so what does that actually mean? Do we just go find people that look like ourselves? That's very dangerous. People that come to you that are trained, for example, a consultant will give a lovely pitch, right? But that's not really getting to know the person. That's not being able to evaluate that person and understand whether he, she has the ability to build a great company, inspire people, to bring their PA along with them in their entrepreneurial venture, et cetera. And so I think a lot of thought has to go into selecting that right team, that right person that you want to back. And I think one of the things I look for are people that I can spend a long time with, not grow tired of. They won't grow tired of me, that we have an alignment of interests, and that we both listen well to what the other is saying. So that's kind of some of the things I'm looking for, maybe one level down.
Yeah, 100%. I think half the time when I'm going back and forth with founders on the bits and bytes of the idea is more, it's more like a dating process. It's more like, I don't necessarily care what's their initial thesis. It's more like a playground for us or a platform for us to exchange ideas and for me to see how they think. And, it's a bit of a double click into just listening to the pitch and better understanding the founders.
But yet, we all talk about, we're from MIT and other institutions. So how important is training and different things like that?
If I may jump in,
Yeah.
I think, the team is absolutely very important, but you cannot examine it, in the absence of the product and the
Right.
market in general.
Right.
Because you need specific training, okay, and experience to service your market. I completely agree that you will pivot who knows how many times, but as a team, you have to prepare to service the technology sector you are creating, right, be it SaaS or whatever it is, chips, I don't know, whatever the market is, okay? And then the team has to have both the expertise, training, etc., and the emotional maturity and stability to basically, grow the company. So I wouldn't put them like that. I would, maybe it's because we are a little bit later stage, I don't know, but I would put them closer. And also remember, in a startup, the clock is ticking. This means that you don't have a lot of time to do those pivots, okay? So, the startups will eventually, run out of money. So the more focused and clear you are about your vision, the better you are. Also, after the vehicle, so to speak, starts its high-speed motion, it's much more difficult to change the direction, okay? So in the early days, yes, but as you grow, it becomes more and more, it becomes harder, right? And the more focused you are from the beginning, it's like, like a projectile, okay? 1 degree off in the beginning can send you, somewhere very different. So it pays to be focused from the beginning.
Yeah,
Okay?
I would say maybe just to complement and maybe to add another dimension. We invest just after you, right? We invest and pre-seed, so we have a beginning of a market, a beginning of a product market fit, but it's still very early. But we do that also in growth. And what I would say is that, even a growth company, they were a seed company 5 years earlier, so it's still very early. And the founders, the successful founders, it's still their baby. So there's still this dimension. I would say, of course, market is important. Yes, you need to have a product. The team and all that, it's difficult to oppose one or another. It's more, a combination of things. But what I would say is that team is a necessary condition. You cannot build, even with a great idea, you will not build a great business without a very good team.
Yeah.
But the problem comes, what is a very good team? Because I completely agree, Rob, with what you said. I mean, you have a consultant coming, you will have a very good pitch, very charismatic people. But the problem is that it's not that, right? And the problem also is that you will see what a good team is after the fact. The problem is that we invest before the fact, right? There's many different dimensions. It's about resilience. It's about leadership, and leadership in good times, but also in bad times. And we see that at the moment, right? When things are a little bit more difficult, the companies that tend to do the best are the ones with leaders that are able to motivate their team, to explain, to navigate the market, to react quickly and adapt quickly. And I would say, and this is the most difficult thing because it's almost impossible to assess, teams that will be able to change their job description every 2 years. Because you don't manage a company at the seed stage when there is 2 or 3 or 4 employees, as when you have 10, 50, 100, 1,000 and so on.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult to assess that initially. I mean, somebody can be a good product people, a good leader with a small team, but maybe not
they can't scale it.
Exactly.
They're not really that type of person.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter where people are in their careers. It also matters what the derivative is. In other words, what is the trajectory in their career. So when they come to you, it has to make sense. In other words, the arrow has to point in the right direction, and you just put some more fuel in that path that they have already set themselves.
Okay. We're going to keep following on this thread, and I've got a follow-up question for it. But I also want to address the audience for a second and let you know, we say technology doesn't matter, but in a way it does because it's powering this. And you've got a direct line to these folks here. And so I can look and see your questions. So check out our panel and type in your questions. I've got a lot here, but I want to hear from you, and we want to really address what you want to know. But first up, I want to talk, so I thought it was very clever how he did the chat GPT at the beginning. And, I work at Sloan, and we've been working with GPT. We did GPT-2, GPT-3, and really playing in that and thinking about how the research that I work on is people and technology, and how do you do organizational design in new ways, thinking about that. So we were just talking about it's all about the team, but now that we have potentially technology deeply embedded in that mix, how are you thinking about that? Who's investing in the AI space? And it's blowing up right now. What's going on, Al?
It's definitely blowing up. We have one of our portfolio companies is Altered. They're based in the UK, and they create software that can take your voice and convert it to sound from somebody else. Presumably a very talented, very expensive, precious voice. Maybe a voice that's died, a voice that's aging, and is losing its ability to generate revenue as, let's say, as an actor. So it's very interesting to see, first of all, the quality of the conversion is mind-boggling.
Yep.
And in some ways it's scary, because if you train the system, then it can make phone calls on my behalf and do all sorts of things that maybe I don't want to. So I think that opens up multiple questions about how to use it, etc. But the fact of the matter is that the technological pace is definitely accelerating, and it's just mind-boggling. And I've been in this, I was a professor of electrical engineering from, 1995. So I've seen a lot of generations of technologies. It's definitely clear that things are compressing. In fact, it was pointed out that ChatGPT, in 5 days, right, it reached the level of user support that in the old days it took 5 months. So.
Right.
We're very excited about the space.
You don't even have to use the word AI. I mean, if you think about all the sensors that are being deployed around the world in lots of different capacities, and they're cheap. When you think about computers and how cheap they've become and how easy it is to write an algorithm, you can collect all sorts of data that you can use for good. You can also use it for bad, which is, I think, the challenge today. But specifically, our one investment in Greece is 𝐷eepSea, which is all about AI to optimize the routing of ships. And if you collect all that data and you put an AI engine on top of that, you can optimize the routing of the ship so you can decrease the amount of fuel it uses, right? And you can drop the fuel consumption by 10, 15%. So if you're trying to make the world a better place, why spend years working on alternative fuel when you can put some technology and collect some data and have an immediate effect? So what I love about some of these tools, some of this information that's now at our fingertips, is we can do something today about some of the problems that we have.
I think, separately on artificial intelligence in general, I think there's been an interesting shift because a few years ago, it was actually hard to just implement a good AI engine. So the value was with the right algorithm developers, with the right engineers, and this is where the core value laid. We've been lucky to witness huge reduction in barriers to entry in developing any AI engine, whether it's tools, whether it's just the body of knowledge that exists here. And today, every half-decent engineer could easily, within a week, implement some sort of AI engine, and that's brilliant. And piggybacking a little bit on your point, it has shifted to a point where the sustainable value, or where the core value of a new company, isn't necessarily in the ability to develop the algorithms, but in the ability to gather unique proprietary data and use it. So we've turned from the algorithm being king to the data being king, and that created all sorts of really interesting business dynamics that me as an investor is having to now acknowledge. So if at first I was looking for that team that could hire the most brilliant engineers, now it's more about proprietary data, how to get it and how to get to it. So I think that's a really interesting development in companies' core value, and at least in my investment strategy. Secondly, on ChatGPT, I wish I knew. It's such an amazing technology. It opened the door to so many new technologies, whether in fraud, by the way, now creating the need for some countermeasures, but also in customer support, in advertising, in content creation. It's even been a joke of all those taxi drivers thought AI was going to take their job, and now it took the copywriter's position. So, we didn't see that coming. So yeah, there's so many new things that could now happen, but I feel like most of the new, or most of the startups that I'm seeing now coming up are still just first level, obvious things we can do with it. I'm still looking for a key use case that is a game changer, and I don't feel like I've seen enough of those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I would say I would just echo that. I think, AI is now, it's not a question whether AI is important or not important. It's part of everything. And it's true that AI is a commodity now. You have
commodity.
you have AI algorithm readily available on the shelf. You have TensorFlow. Google has done a lot to democratize AI. You have, a Python programmer can do AI using a predefined module. So you have AI everything, and you cannot see a pitch. I don't know about you guys, but there's always AI somewhere in the pitch, right? And sometimes it's very simple. It's not really AI, but you need to have AI. So AI is everywhere. AI is also becoming mainstream for the enterprise world. We have a survey that we do every year where some corporate allocate their budget. AI was kind of more on the experimental side. So some, billion of dollars or euros 4 years ago. It's now really mainstream. It's the main part of their budget. So AI will continue. But now, to go back to my question, what is AI? What's the next generation of AI? And frankly, when you look at ChatGPT, it's both exciting and scary, right? Yeah. On several fronts, from a societal standpoint, what it means for jobs and for many dimensions of society, but also as an investors, because the innovation cycle are becoming shorter and shorter. And even young startups that were quite good 3 years ago are disrupted now by ChatGPT. We have looked, a few years ago to many startups in the chatbot business, using AI, but the AI of that time to do chatbots and to have. We didn't invest because we were afraid of something of this kind. We didn't know about ChatGPT, but something of this, and it happened. Now with ChatGPT, I'm sure that in a few years, maybe months, you will have chatbots based on generative AI very easily. So
we have other. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just to finish, and for us as an investor, the problem of the cycle, the innovation cycle. How often you have a new innovation that will disrupt the previous one. It seems to me that it's shortening and shortening and shortening, which means that it's more and more difficult to make good return, actually.
I was about to say that we had other generations of AI technology that are very pervasive. Automatic speech recognition, for example, is AI. Yes. Okay, today we associate AI with deep learning and NLP, but this has a long history of innovation, and obviously speech recognition, it's part of it. If I call now the local mobile company for technical support, guess who is picking up the phone? Yeah. It's not a person, waiting for me to call. So this has been part of our lives for many, many years, and I think what you will see is more and more sort of these kinds of systems, will be built, on tools that are becoming generic, so that startups can use them and build these kinds of services that will plug into whatever enterprise sort of solutions are out there, So, so you can write, let's say I'm annoyed in a call, you could make a ChatGPT call, write a short paragraph for Alex, so I can sort of make him feel less angry because he's not happy with the service. So the software responds, I generate the voice, the speech, and it's played back to me. I mean, I'm just making a very simple example up. So we can look back in the past and see how these things were incorporated. It's nothing new, in other words. What's happening now is not new.
Absolutely. We're on another hype cycle, and I could talk about AI all day long, but our audience calls, and they have asked us some questions. So let's go into this. So from Demetrius, thank you, wants to know, and I think Rob, you're going to take this one. What is advice for companies in Greece that want to go into the U.S. market?
Well, that's a good question. Already, I think there's a supposition there that Europe's not an interesting place to build a company.
I was hoping you'd.
So I'm not sure that's the case. I think the first comment is it depends what business you're in ultimately as to which markets you should.
Software company, he says.
Okay, so software company. So I think you always have to find your key customers relatively close at home, right? If not Greece, then around Europe, because the cost of setting up a U.S. office is not cheap, and we can have experts here trying to could probably elaborate on that. But to start a good sales and marketing effort in the U.S. will probably cost you at least $1 million. And so if you just sort of show up there and say, I'm here, I think it's very difficult to do. So I think you have to find some early customers in this part of the world, prove it out. It is absolutely the case that still when you look at M&A, the largest acquirers of technology companies around the world are in North America. So at some point in time, you want to be visible in that market. But I don't think I would do it on day one. So find a good local investor, find some good local customers, and I mean Europe in that probably explanation. And then you hit milestones, and with those milestones, you can enter the US market. But others may have a different view.
Spot on.
Okay, perfect. Then you brought up actually another question, and it was a question from George. Thank you, George, on what is the right moment to approach an investor, and he wants to know what qualities should they look for.
Anybody want?
We have 2 hours, so.
Again, as probably the earliest investor in the group, I think it's a very common answer to say as early as possible, but I actually want to caveat that because, like it or not, first impression matters. And if you're completely confused, if it's just a question, if it's just, you could, but it can't just be any investor. It needs to be an investor that you have some sort of minimal rapport with them. I personally spend probably half my time advising founders and working with them, but it's typically founders that are either second-time founders of my portfolio companies, valued friends of my valued friends, people that I'm already I already somehow see in very high regards. So I think if you're actually really in need of advice and getting the investor perspective, it makes sense. But when you're approaching to fundraise for a company, you should come prepared, and you should realize that this is a first impression. So it could be before you're actually ready to raise funds, but it needs to be after you have something significant to say and have a good grasp of your business.
Terrific. Okay, on this one, I want to do a speed round.
Okay.
So we're just going to go sort of down the round. This is from Costas, and he wants to know a characteristic, a key characteristic, but a constant characteristic that investors identify in a good team. So just sort of like, one phrase on what a key characteristic you look for in a good team.
One word, 2 words. Tenacious intelligence.
I said it before, listener.
Listener?
Mine would be resiliency. And if you want another sentence, I'll also say that the team is mutually exhaustive and comprehensive. So, MISI in consultant speak. You just need to have all the skills and not to have 2 people sort of stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah, I would say resilience, I already said that. Vision, and just to add that, complementarity. I mean, when you have, because the question was not about a founder, it's about a team. You want to have people that can work together, clearly. I mean, you don't want founders, but that each brings something to the table that is different.
Come on, Francois, you're French. It should be passion. Passion. So.
That too.
Especially now, yeah.
Okay, so Andres has a question that I think it's a little bit deeper. I want to go into it though. Okay, with the current investment climate being very difficult, do we agree with that? Is it? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. For companies pre-profitability with early revenue and some traction, what are you mostly looking for when making your investment decisions? So mostly A/B round.
I'll sit this one out because I don't do
So that's what we do, and it's each fund has their own style. What's important at this stage, first of all, Series A post-revenue, that's what makes our life much easier than yours, because when you are able to speak to clients, people that are really buy the product, that bought the product, that they can tell about why they did it, the competition. It helps a lot to understand the potential of a company. And for us, what we are looking for, what we have been looking for since the beginning, which was a little bit out of favor 2 years ago, is path to profitability. So, of course, all companies in which we invest are still loss-making, but we want to understand, what's the unit economics, how capital efficient they are, and so on. So we spend a lot of time, even with companies that have only 1, 2, 3 million of revenue, to understand, cohorts, unit economics, and so on. So it's the story, it's the team, but at that stage, it's also, is the business efficient, basically.
Got it.
So, I mean, in these types of markets, you have to make sure that the company is solving somebody's problem and they're willing to pay for that solution. And so continuing to see growth in a market which is harder, I think is actually pretty important. Absolutely correct. We have to be capital efficient in these types of markets, so you can't spend a lot of money doing that. But if you have no growth, nobody's going to buy you one day. Nobody's going to be interested in that next round. So you still have to hit milestones to achieve that next round of funding or that exit. So it is much more challenging today, but you know what everybody always says that's been through it is the best companies are made in times like these.
That's terrific. Alex, you want to talk about the environment here? What are you seeing in startups that you're talking to?
That's a very good question. So Greece has had a very nice sort of growth over the past, I guess, 7-8 years in terms of startups. We had, you know, the initial funds were very small, like $10-15 million funds. So we're investing in very small software-driven startups. There's a very well-known here in Greece called TaxiBit.
Yeah.
It was like a Uber lookalike, which was sold to Daimler-Benz. But that became like the very well-known startup in Greece. But things matured, and we had a first generation of venture capital firms with support from the government and Europe, which created a set of, I guess, 6 VCs of various sizes and of different maturity levels. Some were very early stage, some later stage. And I think they did extremely well. So we had companies that grew essentially in Greece and exited to Facebook. So we had actually at Big Pie, 𝐿𝐸𝐿 was acquired last year. There was another company, Softomotive, which was sold to Microsoft. So you started seeing companies growing, reaching sizes of 100+ million. You know, there are currently companies that are still private that grew out of that era. Workable is one, Persado is another. They are reaching, you know, several $100s of million in valuation. They moved from Greece, by the way, to the US, but this happened, you know, after they attained, you know, a very significant size in the European market. So I think things have been going extremely well. Now we're thinking this third generation of funds. So you have funds like in the $100 million range, okay? Again, with support from the government, but with a lot of support from private investors. And I think it's very positive to see founders who have exited to become RLPs. For me, that's the secret of the success of the US system, right? That essentially founders who made money took some of this money, put it back on the system. And it becomes sort of a self-feeding cycle, which works fantastically well in the US and elsewhere. So I think we're getting to that point. We are very fortunate to have a very strong diaspora. I was, you know, one of them. So people who left Greece, studied the work, they learned a lot of things. You know, they created the company. They saw that building a team in Greece is beneficial in several ways. We have very, you know, good talent, very well-educated people that are not paid as expensively, let's say, as in Boston, New York, or San Francisco. And they tend to stick to the jobs longer than they would, let's say, in Silicon Valley, where, you know, every year you might actually switch jobs. So here, people basically, if they're happy with what they do, they'll stick around. So that has created a very nice environment. And of course, you know, obviously the climate, the history, etc., it becomes so attractive that people are actually moving from the US to Greece. In one of our portfolio companies, Orpheum, okay, the finance person moved to Greece and built, in fact, the finance department here, which is not what you would normally expect. You would think the software team would do. In this particular company, by the way, they have, I think, 25 people in LA and 250 in Greece. So just to get an idea. So I think things are going extremely well. And again, it's greatly supported by the state here, which is important because legislation helps, and it helps when it doesn't block. In other words, there were a lot of things that were blocking innovation and entrepreneurship in universities. I mean, I can talk for hours about that. I will not. Okay, but it was a very problematic environment. It gets better. And remember that a lot of the deep tech innovation comes from educational institutions and research centers, okay? So things have been improving, and so I think it's great. And I think we're on a growth path, and I think it will just continue. So that's great. I'm very happy about that.
No, that's terrific. And Alex, I just want to note, and it was talked about a little bit this morning, but I want to just add my personal just excitement over the last 10 years, what's happened in this market. I was here 10 years ago as the president of the MIT Enterprise Forum Global, launching MIT Enterprise Forum Greece. And so 10 years later, to see this and to hear what's happening in this market is so terrific. And that it's continuing on this trajectory is amazing. So I think that that's just a wonderful. So Dimitris, think hard before you leave here to go to America. So I think that, let's see. Now, Kathy has asked a question that's bringing us back to AI a little bit. And so, but I think it's an interesting one because it takes us up a level and says, if you could design a society that would be more equitable, if there's a fear that AI is going to take away all the jobs, and I think that's a question of whether or not that's even possible. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about universal income, UBI? How are you thinking sort of longer term about sort of societal big changes when you're making impact investment decisions? Maybe let's talk about it from that level.
That's a big question.
Yeah, so I thought it would be interesting to go up a level and sort of talk about societal things. And maybe, Rob, you want to kick us off in that you switched to a sustainability fund. And thinking about what were your thoughts on doing that?
So I think I'd reached a point in my career where you have success and you're pretty good at what you do, and you can keep doing it over and over, or you can start to give something back. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I set it up originally. So I'm tackling a part of the challenge. And I understand through that question, there are other challenges that can be tackled. Frankly, there's more that our fund could do. We could do breakthrough stuff that's pre-revenue. We could do infrastructure stuff, what have you in the world of climate. But we have a very specific role. We have a very specific set of talents, and we tackle that problem. I think more and more people are interested in their careers tackling problems. And you start to see more individuals selecting jobs where you can do something worthwhile. And I think it's up to the individual to decide what they want to do. I think a more challenging question is to what extent should corporates start to be mission-based? And you see, particularly in Europe, groups like Danone and Unilever and companies like that say, well, we're going to be more sustainable. We're on the right path. You see Larry Fink at BlackRock saying that through his investing philosophy. And then you get society starting to push back, saying, that's not your role, that's not your job. So I think that's where the debate becomes much more interesting, is what's the role of the corporate? Governments, on the other hand, I think they should represent the people. And if the people want to change, we should change. I think the Greek government's done a great job of changing society for the better. And I'd like to see other governments around the world be as good as the Greek government, which is something to reflect on for a second. Because I think the United States might be lacking a little leadership. In the UK, we're on our third head of state in a while, and I think France is having some challenges, and perhaps Israel's having some challenges.
Perhaps.
So it's absolutely pretty interesting to see. So for me, it starts with the individual. More and more people should be seeking out things, I think, where you can make a difference. At the corporate level, you're starting to see people push back on it, but I like corporates that do the right thing. And then finally, government should lead the people.
I think, I don't know if accidentally or not, but you touched an interesting topic because I'm not sure people are aware, but we have a very big crisis in Israel around the independence of the judiciary system. So effectively, the government is doing some moves that are putting individual human rights in, hopefully not in danger, but they're not as guaranteed as there used to be. And one of the biggest voices coming to resist that move is actually the high-tech sector. So many founders, venture capitalists, large corporations are using their lobbying power to try and stop it, coming from, I think it's probably the first time the high-tech sector has went on strike, but that has happened a few times in the last few weeks, and I think it comes from exactly what you said of I've reached success, several individuals as well, several companies feeling that. now let's put a different goal that's not measured in money. And I think it's great because you're putting a lot of very strong, very successful people onto challenging problems that used to only be tackled by the government sector.
Also, I think we play a big role as investors in social mobility. In other words, you invest in a team of, in our case, 2 PhD students, out of school, they don't have any money. They start out, an angel investor comes in, and after 10 years, they have made a small fortune. And so their whole life has changed, but also they themselves can become agents of change later in their lives.
Right.
And with the entire team that went with them, right? So I think, we live in a microcosm, okay? We don't do macro. We find the little jewels here and there, and we support them to grow. But still, I think that can have a significant impact because, these people can actually have a significant impact wherever they end up, okay? So to me, that's a joy to see, right? That somebody who, didn't inherit anything, he wasn't the son of a daughter of somebody else, just from sheer perseverance, intelligence, talent, they just managed to grow. That's great.
Alexandros wrote in, and I think this is interesting. Maybe we just touch on it, but I want to say it is, how do you distinguish the path derivative, and derivative in quotes, path derivative of each person before investing in their company? Is that something that you learn over time and experience? Is that instinct? I think that's sort of an interesting question.
I guess I made the point of the derivative. Look, you talk with people, you try to learn as much as you can when you first interact with them, okay? And so when you're talking about a potential investment, and hopefully you'll appreciate where they are. And I think with age, one of the good things with age is that you have seen several, people in your life, and you have learned to see patterns, understand. And this is a business where I think emotional intelligence is very important. You need to be able to understand, where the person sitting across from you is at that particular moment in their lives and what they're thinking, what they're feeling. So I think that's, to me at least, I feel it's a big part of the job, especially because we are earlier stage, let's say, than Series B, where you have tons of Excel sheets to go through and analyze. We don't. I mean, we are in a similar situation, okay, where there's very little to go about, okay? So.
Yes, but to your point, you're right, and that's also that's a danger because you have all these numbers, all these Excel,
you can be
like that, and
lost
you tend to focus on that, and you forget that there's a team. And Series B or Series A, it's still very early, right?
That's true. That's true.
There's still a lot of things to do. But what is going to happen at Series B? Let's say the company has 25, 30, 40 people. If they are successful, they will go to 100, 200, 300. And the team, they will, to my earlier point, they will not manage a team of 20 people anymore. They will manage a team of managers to use all world.
Right.
There is a different way to organize company. But you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a very different
It is, absolutely, yeah.
It's they will start to go to other markets. They will start to go from Greece to the US, maybe this type of. It requires a lot of different skills. Sure. So that's really the derivative question that you mentioned.
I want to answer your question from the very beginning. Yes, I have backed an entrepreneur from MIT, and yes, I have backed an entrepreneur who did not have a college degree.
Me too.
And both were successful. So I'm not sure about derivatives.
I think investing out of Israel, we might have tools at our disposal that international investors don't get to leverage as much. So we have the Israeli army, and we're such a, 8,200, but also, honestly, I found that some of the most successful entrepreneurs came from combat units because that's tenacity and that's resilience.
Yeah. About resilience, about leadership.
To answer Rob's point, Rob, the opposite. The derivative argument supports what you just said, that it doesn't matter where the person is. I don't care if you have a degree. I care what where you came to today. So you might, if you had a path that you ended up in a position where you don't have a degree, right? But it shows that you build stuff, that's where the derivative comes in.
He's the professor.
I'm sorry.
I'm listening and learning. So there you go.
What's the equation for the derivative?
Do we have a blackboard, please?
There will be a makeup session later on too.
Okay, let's see. So one more speed round, and then we're going to go to the final question. Speed round is there, what do you find of all, like the best investments that you've made? like think of all the really good ones. Was there a common theme? Was there something common in all of those, or were they one-offs? So that one sort of just do fast. And then your last one, while you're thinking about that, is I want to have the best piece of advice or something that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career. That's what you're going to end on. But first is just that common thing in your best investment, or if you just want to tell the quick point about what the best investment you ever did was.
I'll go first because I know what I want to say. That the best investment I've made is not based on return. It's based on where I felt like I made a difference. And so when I'm emotionally engaged in something where I've helped to solve a problem, where I've gotten somebody across the line, sometimes created something out of nothing, you sometimes feel like, that's the most satisfying thing.
Terrific.
So to go to maybe to speak about return, that's also a dimension for good investment. So there are many different factors. Sometimes it's super technology, super unique, being very early, having a very good team. But one thing I would like to share with the audience is that the best investment we have done, we have an investment committee with all the partners, let's say, so 7 of us. The best ones, the worst ones are the one when there was consensus in the team. The best ones are the one where there was the most disagreement. And it's
so arguing is good.
And it's now statistically relevant when I'm saying we have enough examples. So why? Because if there is a consensus, it means it's too obvious. It's too late.
Yeah.
So for that reason, exactly, when we set up our own fund and we set up the decision process procedure, every partner could say, let me have this one, and he gets to do the investment. So no consensus is needed, but very strong conviction is needed. And we hope that's a way to maximize our decision-making process. I think my best investments were the ones where I relied on my internal conviction rather than the market. So it was a little bit, all of them were to some extent overlooked deals, companies that already heard no from a lot of people, and my hand was shaking just a little bit when making those. So those ended up being the best ones. And maybe a little bit in contrary to that, what I wish I knew coming into this industry is that I'm not a buyer, I'm a seller. Because the best investments or the best founders are ones that you're going to have to fight for. And I think coming in, I thought that making the right decision was going to be 90% of my job, but actually making myself attractive to the right founders ended up being 90% of my job.
Oh, that's interesting. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. So we are going into a 30-second final on, and Alex, you're going to start us. What is the best piece of advice?
I mean, for founders?
I think you could take it either way. It could be the best piece of advice for founders if you have something profound, or the best piece of advice that impacted you.
I think, look, if you start a company, it's a non-linear event in your life. It's a huge change. And I think there is something, people that want to do this, there is a little voice within them, okay, that tells them, do it. But there are 1,000 reasons why you would not, do it. So my advice is to listen to that voice and pay attention and act on that.
Listen to the voice. Excellent.
I'm an optimist. I'm positive. I think most of my companies I'm investing will be successful, hopefully all. But the one thing I'd always say is if you want to be honest with yourself, ask your question at the beginning why your company failed and go figure out how to fix it before you start.
Okay, figure it out.
I'm actually going to choose advice for aspiring VC.
Love it. Excellent.
There's no school to teach you how to be a VC. There's no degree in VC-ness. And so I think the best investors learn how to be investors by working with really good investors. So if you're just starting out your career and thinking and wanting to be a venture capitalist, don't worry too much about where you want to work. Think about who you want to work with and find a way to work with that person, because that is the best and potentially the only way that you'll learn how to be a good VC.
Thank you. I became a BC in 2016. It was like a whole new language, a whole new lingo, and that's great advice. Thank you, and thank you for everyone. Okay, final word, Francois.
Yeah, so quickly, I would say to the funders of future funders, to your point, passion, be passionate about what you want to do. Have a purpose. So, you know, it's very important when you wake up in the morning that you know what you are doing. I mean, why you are doing what you are doing. So absolute passion, because there will be good times and bad times. And I would say, maybe in a provocative way, I would say money shouldn't be the first motivation. There should be, you know, change the world, do good things, create something, build, you know, be proud about. Money will be a byproduct of success.
Terrific. And with that, I want to thank this terrific panel. You were all amazing. This was a terrific conversation. I hope that we learned, people in the audience learned a lot, and we tried to get to all of your questions and gave some insights, and really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.